So hello everyone. So welcome to week 3 of OES event. So this time we have Sarah Darby with us, and we're talking about smart local energy with a project specific to the Local Energy Oxfordshire. So Dr. Sarah Darby is associate professor with the energy program at Oxford Energy Environmental Change Institute. She has a special interest in how energy systems change as a result of people interacting with technology and with each other. And she is leading the work package 6 of Project LEO, which is Local Energy Oxfordshire, which is dedicated to evaluating this major and ambitious project, engaging stakeholders and sharing knowledge gained through the LEO as widely as possible. So in this talk, Sarah will share with us her exciting work on smart energy systems and demand-side responses, which are crucial for renewable energy integration. In particular, she will be discussing the lessons she learned from her involvement in Project LEO, which is one of the UK's most ambitious and innovative energy trials aimed for net zero carbon system focused on the grid edge, where it's closest to the end users. You can find more about the project with the link that's in the description. And also, without further ado, we're just going to pass on to Sarah. So maybe during the presentation, you won't be able to see our faces, but we'll have the PowerPoint shortly. Yeah, so would you like to?
Yes, so I'll just, if you're watching, welcome, and here I am. And now I'm just going to give over to the slides. So you'll hear voices, mine and people who ask questions, but you'll just be seeing the slides. Okay.
Right. Okay, so you can do a share now.
Okay.
Yeah, I hope that is working now.
Right. Well,
yeah.
Let me know if not.
Right.
Right.
Sorry about that.
Okay. So the movement from this centralized to this much more decentralized sort of system, where you've got your generation assets scattered all over the place, and also increasingly you're getting assets that are used for storage, which is obviously very important once you're relying quite heavily on wind and on solar, which are of course variable. So it's a very different kind of configuration, and the enormous challenge to the network operators at the moment is adjusting to this, because the system is not designed for this. To put it in another sort of way, we're going from what's on the left to this, and things are relatively clear cut on the left. You know, if you want to make changes, there are only a few actors you need to talk to and negotiate with in order to make that change, and it happens. This sort of thing, this where you're moving from that pretty simple linear sort of structure to a network. You've got much more actors, you've got different types of technology, and at the same time, you've got the whole patterns of demand changing as well for what you're doing. And specifically, you know, the two big ones for this country are the electrification of heating and the electrification of personal transport. So you've got your EVs and the heat. So you've got changes in the patterns of demand, in the type of demand, in the patterns of demand, because we start having to think, well, what times of day are these types of demand going to kick in, and how do we adjust to that, and how do we manage that, and how do we manage that when there's a lot of PV feeding directly into the distribution network. Okay, not a big power station feeding into the high voltage network, lots of small devices feeding into the low voltage distribution network. How do you manage all of that, in addition to having to manage the changing demand of all your customers? So we're moving to something a lot that is really challenging in terms of network management. And we're doing it in a country where we have a fantastic electricity system, really. It's gold standard. We have hardly ever had blackouts. People are used to electricity always being there when they want it, at a constant price, you know, regardless of the time of day. So ICT is a very important part of the new picture. You have to be able to manage this in real time, very high resolution. You need very good data, and you need very good systems for handling it. And I guess quite a lot of you have probably heard this mantra of decarbonize, digitize, decentralize, and democratize. Sometimes it's only the first three. I think the fourth one's very important too, because none of this happens, none of this gets to work unless it's got public support for it. So you do need to bring people with you in doing this. And my main thesis, if you like, for the evening, which you may like to discuss or dispute with me, is that all energy transitions are actually local, right? Whatever's happening at the high level, it's always going to have to work locally, because all demand is local and has local characteristics depending on the climate, the types of buildings, how people are getting about, how wealthy they are, and how many appliances they have, you know, how densely they populated an area is. There are all these local factors that will always affect demand. And increasingly, supply is local as well. So all energy transitions have to be made local. And I would say they're also social, because they also inevitably involve people. And this is even in a system that has quite high levels of automation in. It's still going to rely on a lot of human factors. So, bringing it to our locality, lovely Oxfordshire. This is the Oxfordshire County Council's happy picture of a thriving Oxfordshire of the future. Lots of things going on, and trying to bring together a sense of This is a place that matters a lot to the people who live in it. This White Horse, I don't know if any of you have actually seen the White Horse. It's about 15 miles from here on a hill. It goes right back to the Iron Age, I think. It's probably about 3,000 years old or something. This beautiful horse that's carved into the hill. You know, it really matters a lot to the people of Oxfordshire, their environment, their buildings. They're attached to the place. It's a place where they work, where they trade, you know, all these things going on. And that kind of life can be a good life in the county, a prosperous life, and at the same time, it can be one where greenhouse gas emissions are really slashed seriously, and this starts happening now, and you know, there is this target to reduce the emissions by 50%. So it's quite demanding. It's achievable, we think, but it's not going to be straightforward necessarily. And that by that time, 40% of our heating will be done with renewable electricity, say. And we'll have a lot more, it says 2,000 gigawatt hours additional generation. I mean, that means renewables generation, most of which will be solar. Because Oxfordshire isn't a very windy county, and it's also a county where there aren't a lot of suitable sites anyway. So, to put it mildly, you know, the line at the bottom, the electricity network will need to adapt. This gives you the baseline figures that we're working from for the 5 local authorities in Oxfordshire. So the Charwell District Council is the north of the county, there's Oxford City, then there's South Oxfordshire, the Vale of White Horse, and there's West Oxfordshire. And interestingly, these have quite fairly different political makeups if you look at the local councils. So Oxford is pretty solidly Labour, Charwell pretty solidly Conservative, and West Oxfordshire Conservative Lib Dem. South Oxfordshire, Vale of the White Horse, I think the Liberal Democrats are probably the strongest parties. So it's quite diverse politically, but every single council has declared a climate emergency. So there is this cross-party support, you could say, that something needs doing urgently. In terms of democratisation, things are looking quite good. They're looking favourable. And if you look at the local plans, they all have something to say on this. I mean, they're finding their way. It's easy to declare a climate emergency in a way, but then the question arises, okay, so what do we do? You know, and I think it's fair to say that, you know, everybody's feeling their way here about what this means and what needs to be done. So Oxford City Council is the most advanced in actually getting things underway, getting things moving. But there is that willingness there. And you can see there too the rough division of energy use and how Oxford actually has the lowest per capita energy use because we don't travel nearly as much as the people out in the country. But you see there's a lot of transport there potentially to be electrified. So that's a lot of mobile batteries. And it's also a lot of charging that has to be managed so it doesn't all happen at the same time, right? And you see the significance of all that domestic energy. So that's very highly distributed. Lots and lots and lots of small actors who have demand, some of which you may be able to flex with demand side response, aggregate and flex. A lot of demand, and also some of them will have PV on the roof or possibly solar water heating. So, you know, there's the potential there. From the domestic, yeah.
Sorry, is this core data, or have you analysed this? I didn't realise that. I think, can you get this statistics and the data directly on South Oxfordshire, or we have to extrapolate and assume a per capita use?
The per capita thing, I'm just doing from the top of my head, knowing how the population is in Oxfordshire. So I couldn't give you an exact figure for per capita usage, but I mean.
But how do you know that Cherwell Council uses so much more than Oxford? Is that in the data?
Yes, it is. And this is national data, actually. This is from Bayes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you've got the reference there, and in fact it comes from the Oxfordshire Energy Strategy, so you've got the link there. This is where the smart local energy system concept comes in. Can you define a locality and get a local system working in that area? So something that belongs in its place with those the characteristics of a place and functions well. And we're not talking here about removing Oxfordshire from the national grid, okay? But we are talking about a system in which you manage most, if not all, the electricity flows locally. So, and in which you can have a local market for flexibility, for trading excess supply at times when we're not using it, if you're a small generator, for storing, and operating in the different types of power markets that exist to maintain the system in a steady state. So the main thing is that you have the generation and you have the other assets. They're close to the people who are using them. It's smart. It does involve quite a bit of technical innovation, quite a bit of automation, you can imagine, and it uses ICT a lot. It's equitable. This is part of the concept and a crucial part of the concept, and this is links with the democratization, really. So in the past, if you're poor, the worry is, am I going to have enough money to pay my electricity bill and my gas bill? In the future, it's going to be, that still may be an issue, but there's also going to be, do I have any money to invest in assets that will be used in these new systems? So it'll be more about assets and capital rather than about income and expenditure. It flows. So the danger is that some people they have no assets they can deploy in this, and they get left behind. So we have to look at, how much can you have access to the new system through the community you belong to. What kind of arrangements can be put in place so that everyone can benefit from this? Or what kind of tariffs are you going to be on if you're a disadvantaged person? So the equity thing is something we pay a lot of attention to, and environmentally sustainable. So there we're talking, we're not actually talking about biodiversity or embodied carbon, but we are talking about net zero carbon, and we're talking about resilience as well. So it does need to be a system that is nice and robust and resilient, so that if something goes wrong, there is a fallback plan. Because, as I say, people are very, to maintain the supply, as people have grown to expect it, that there is a reliable supply. Okay, and then, so this smart local energy system is a concept that is being tested out in various ways around the country now, I would say. It's a fairly new concept, but it's beginning to gather steam now, and it's gathering momentum. And there is a big project program called Energy Rev, based at the University of Strathclyde, which is doing a lot of academic work on this. There are just 3 big demonstrator projects, and Leo is one of them. The other one, ESO, which you may well hear about this year too, is also based in Oxford. That's very different in character. But it is linked, and we do talk to each other when we can. We try and stay in touch. And the other one is up in the Orkney Islands, so right the other end of the country. It is like the sort of system we're talking about. It sort of reflects that complexity. It has 10 partners. Potentially, there's nearly 700,000 Oxford residents who may eventually be involved. It's a 4-year project, so that gives us a good chunk of time in which to start do the proof of concept sort of work. It was originally 3, and then COVID arrived, and to our huge relief, we've got an extra year of funding, which we badly need, because it really takes time to get these underway. But I want to stress this 10-year vision. This sort of thing doesn't just happen like that. You have to do a lot of experimentation. You have to do a lot of learning along the way. So I think a 10-year vision is sort of realistic. And I think, I don't know if any of you follow what the Committee on Climate Change have to say about energy transition, but they are absolutely excellent and well worth listening to. And they have just produced the 6th carbon budget for this country, which will run from 2033 to 2037. So they look well ahead. And the message from them is, okay, guys, you've done quite a lot of the easy stuff now. And the easiest stuff is just stop burning coal in power stations. That's pretty straightforward, and we've pretty much completed that. From now on in, getting carbon down is going to be more and more and more about things that affect people's lives directly. So we have to think more and more about what can be done in a distributed way. And 10-year vision, so we started in 2019, it'll end in, so if we take a 10-year vision from then, we're getting towards that 6th carbon budget, and we're certainly into the period when people will be a lot more involved. I hope. I mean, I think it has to be this way. They will be a lot more involved than they have been in the past. And one of the big ones, of course, is going to be how we heat our homes from now on. So these are the sort of people who are involved. In Leo. And you see we have government, we have the Low Carbon Hub doing community energy in the county. We have Scottish and Southern electricity networks who are absolutely crucial and are the project lead. And the nice thing of it is that the Scottish and Southern networks boundary of their area coincides quite nicely with the county boundary. So they're leading. And then we also have working with us, of course, a lot of asset owners, aggregators. We're going to aggregate demand from electric vehicle charging, from businesses, from homes, for trading, for flexibility. We have EDF as an energy supplier, and we have some tech firms and digital innovators, and of course, University of Oxford. So Malcolm McCulloch, who is teaching some of you at the moment, he was one of the people who got this up and running, and is a lead person in it. And we also have Oxford Brookes University working with us. They're doing some terrific work on mapping, which I'll come to later. So here's Low Carbon Hub. So that's one of their early achievements, a small hydro plant on the River Thames. They do a lot of work with communities. They do a lot of outreach work. And they have, in terms of legal structure and financial structure, they have 2 companies, essentially, which are developing renewable energy all around the county, and also supporting communities that want to do their own thing and develop their own renewable projects. Not just actually renewable energy, but also sometimes energy conservation as well. So they've run a very effective Cozy Homes program, helping people to improve their homes and get their energy use down. They're just, at the moment, work is starting on a big solar farm. I think it's going to be the biggest in the country. You can see generating some really substantial amounts. At the moment, I think these solar panels are in Rotterdam, and they're looking for heavy goods vehicle drivers to bring them over here. You're going to need 90 heavy goods vehicles to get all those panels over here to Road Valley. And they started in 2012. So they've built up a lot of links experience in that time. And they've got a lot of investor members. It's interesting. I mean, I told you at the beginning, there's a lot of public support for transition in this county. And really, you would think raising money for renewables might be quite tricky. They found it extraordinarily easy. They raised 3 million earlier this year in about half the time they expected, in 2 or 3 weeks. So, and to look at it in a more schematic sort of way, you can see the value of having the local community work, the local community connections up at the top, where you're developing a market for local energy trading with flexibility assets, so batteries, vehicles, hydro, and solar. So that gives you an idea of how, and Leo is acting as a sort of mediator. It's bringing together the grid, the network operator, the communities to make this work. So this is one of their slides that I'm giving you there, and that is from Leo and also from its sister project, Transition, which is again a network operator project and is operating on a bigger scale, not just in Oxfordshire. So what sort of challenges did we see? Well, plenty of them, really. So there's the very basics one, which is that it's getting quite difficult and quite problematic to manage Oxfordshire's electricity network in places. There are some substations where they're operating at full capacity just about, or sometimes even over full capacity. There's one small village apparently in the county where a lot of people recently have installed solar PV. And there are times when the wires simply can't cope with all that at once, you know. So the decision has to be made. Are we going to put a lot more copper in the ground, you know, dig up the road and reinforce the network? Or are we going to try and work out ways of using that excess solar capacity close by so that it isn't a problem in balancing the network? Also, there are plans for growth in Oxfordshire, a lot more people coming to live here. How's that going to be coped with? So there's a very practical difficulty that the network operator faces. There's the growth of renewables, and we need more and more of them. So that also poses a challenge, you know, just integrating them into the network in a suitable way. And there's the question also of, we've seen how much of Oxfordshire's energy demand is heat and transport. So if we electrify that, how are we going to cope with that? And I put those down as mostly technological, but you can see they're mostly, but you could see a social dimension to pretty much all those. And then there are the mostly social ones as well. So if just from the point of view of managing the project, you know, that's quite a challenge. We're very lucky that we've got a really terrific project manager who is very good at keeping us all in order and friendly with each other. Yeah. So that's all good. But also, you know, the role of local government in all this and their ability to support what's going on. There's the continual challenge of making sure that disadvantaged people aren't left behind. And there's the need to actually change the thinking about how people fit into the picture. So the traditional way is that you're a producer or you're a consumer. And if you look at loads and loads of government documents, they just talk about the consumer. And it's as though everybody, all of us, you know, that's all we do, you know. The only thing that matters is that we pay our electricity bill. And actually, you know, all of us, we have much more interesting lives than that. You know, we do actually act in the system through the sort of things we do with our lives and the energy demands we make. We're also potential investors. We may be tenants or landlords in the place where we live, and that gives us different opportunities or abilities to change what happens with our energy use, what we do with our buildings, our appliances, and our daily lives. We're engineers, we have professional skills, we have the accountants, and we're people who can trade energy if the conditions are right. So just getting a more realistic picture of what human beings are like seems extremely important. So, how are we doing? Right, okay, then once we get, so I hope you get an idea just from all that. The practice is going to be really interesting once you get into it, because there's a lot to do. We started off nice and simple. So this is the very first test we did, and we had this concept of the minimum viable system. So start small, just test out a particular activity or process and see how it works and learn from it, and then start scaling up and doing more complicated things. So the Oxford Bus Company have a big battery there, and the Scottish and Southern engineer there is at a feeder point and is saying, I need you to release the electricity from your battery now to help me manage the local network. Okay, so this isn't even automated. He just phones up when he wants the battery discharging, and there's Adriano taking the call and, you know, pulling the switch on the battery. So it was that simple, the first one. Even then, there were things to be learned from it. So that was the first one. Then we get something a little more complicated here. So this is another hydro station on the River Thames that I think some of you visited. Yes, okay. And the idea was we can hold back the water to some extent and use that as storage, right? So that was another early thing that we tried out. And the next step from that is that you don't do that by making a phone call to the person in charge of the hydro, but you automate that. So that's moved on now to the next level, that can be automated. And then we get to what is just kicking off at the moment, the flexibility market trials, where we're getting something a lot more ambitious with a lot more actors and people who are actually signing contracts to provide flexibility. So this is the ad that went out from the network company. We're looking for people who manage a generation asset or a storage asset in the trial areas, or they own or manage a business that could flex its demand in order to help us manage the network. And so for the last 6 months or so, lots of people in Leo have been preparing for this, and it's starting in earnest very soon now. So that's quite an exciting stage in the process. And another, I would say the other really crucial element to Leo is the smart and fair neighbourhoods. So this is where we're taking a whole locality, a whole community, and we're trying out what can be done to make smart local energy work for them in their community. So I'm just going to give you some examples of that. This is up in North Oxfordshire, so very pretty rural part of the county, with lots of buildings that it's actually quite hard to alter because they're conserved, you know, they have special status because they're historic buildings. But anyway, so a couple of villages there, solar farm nearby, and there is no gas network there, because I know to some of you it may seem strange that we talk about anywhere in England as remote, but these villages are remote by English standards, you know, they're not on the gas network. So there's no gas heating. So people are either heating by electricity or they're heating by oil, which is very expensive and it's fossil fuel, so it has to go. So the aim there is to try hard to use the community networks to promote the uptake of heat pumps. So there'll be electric heat pumps heating a lot of the homes around here, and they will be linked with the solar farm. And the aim will be to use that electricity as much as possible locally, including in the heat pumps.
Roughly how many homes?
No, I'm guessing that with those two villages combined, maybe 1,000, 1,500. No, probably, no, that would be people. Yeah, maybe 700, 800. Yeah. But, and it certainly won't be 700, 800 on heat pumps straight off. We're just starting with a few, but starting to get that underway now. So that's very rural. Then we have Rose Hill, which is in Oxford itself. So that's southwest Oxford, just inside the Ring Road. And this is a relatively deprived area of Oxford. So there are a lot of people there on low incomes. There are a lot of people in social housing as well, though it's a mixed in terms of ownership. So but they have decided, so it's what we call housing estate. And they have decided, or quite a lot of people in the community have the aspiration to be a zero carbon estate. So it's working with the people in that community to start making that happen. So they're doing energy efficiency work with them to help people to bring down their energy bills and incidentally make their homes more suitable for heat pumps. Because in having a heat pump, the size of heat pump that you need rises exponentially with the amount of heat it needs to provide for your house. So the more energy efficient you can get the building, the smaller the heat pump you can have and the more affordable it's going to be. So they're doing energy efficiency and also quite a lot of solar, community solar, and also they have a big battery in the local primary school. So there's quite a lively group there and they're getting things underway. And they are doing this as collaboratively as they can. So the people of the community have been involved in designing what's going to happen, what sort of activities are, what sort of thing they're working towards and how they're getting there. So there is this collaborative element there that's very important. And then the third one I've singled out, there are 5 of these neighbourhoods in all. Is it Incham, which is a village a few miles out from Oxford, where there's a lot of new development planned. So here, Leo is getting in right at the beginning with the planning process, because there's going to be this garden village, and it's estimated about half of them will have EVs. So it's doing the planning right at the beginning for this new development so that it can be as low carbon as possible. And again, there's a lot of community involvement in that, because Incham is quite a big village already, and then they're going to have this new chunk of territory to the north of the road there. So that's very much forward looking. So you start getting an idea of how important it is to know the territory. And a big element in Leo has been the development of our data and the mapping. So I'll give you, just to give you a few examples, we can start with, we're now getting a much better idea of what the county looks like in terms of demographics, in terms of land use, in terms of where the energy assets are and where the energy assets might be in future. Okay, so for example, if you've got off-road parking, where you live, then it's going to be relatively easy for you to have an electric vehicle on a charger. If you've got a south-facing roof, again, there's the potential there that you've got some solar. So we've developed, I haven't been involved in this myself, but the people at Oxford Brookes and at the County Council have done a lot of work developing a huge suite of maps that you can, through GIS, you can lay one on top of the other, you can merge the data, you can do all sorts of clever things with it. And I think they've got about 79 different types of maps now that they can use, which are not only useful from a planning point of view, they're also very useful for talking to people with, for presenting to community groups and saying, well, this is how things look from the air in your community, and this is what might be possible. So their electricity use, and you see how high it is in the rural areas that will be off the gas grid where there's electric heating. This one. Oh yes, this is the percentage of fuel poor homes. So these are the people who have to pay a large chunk of their income just to keep warm, probably because they're in energy inefficient housing, and it's a combination of that and low incomes typically. So there you get a map of fuel poverty and where people are likely to be. You need to look out for them. They're vulnerable. Yeah. Okay. And yes, the household's not connected to the gas grid. Okay.
Oops.
Yeah. Are we all right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Solar generation potential and wind. Where the red is the not suitable. So you can see really not a lot of prospect for wind here. The green bits are potentially suitable, and there are hardly any of them. They're mostly up in the north and west of the county, but there are a few little places there. Yeah.
What's the threshold to determine this suitability?
I don't know, but it will have something to do with, is it a site? Is the land of special value scheduled for building? Is it a site of special scientific interest? Is it a conservation area? These sort of things, I think, as well as, of course, is it exposed to the wind? So you can see not much space for wind in Oxfordshire, but a lot more green when you're looking at solar generation potential. So that would be solar farms as well as rooftop solar. And energy efficiency, which we should never forget, really. So you can go to a community and they can see visually from what we know about their buildings, from their energy performance certificates, where they are at the moment and where they might be. So also really quite specific property level data. As you can imagine, you have to be rather careful here about data protection and confidentiality and so on. But all the same, it still seems to be possible to show people quite a lot of detail from what is publicly available data. So I'll just finish just reminding you about where we're trying to be heading in resilience and the sort of ambition of it. And I hope to have persuaded you to, if you didn't believe it already, that energy transitions are always local and social. And if you have any questions, I'll try and answer them. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I have one question.
Yeah.
It's about the funding. So you've got funding for 4 years with that 1 year extension, but it's a 10-year vision.
Yes.
So are you in the process of requesting additional funding for those additional 6 years, or what's the
We're
plan?
kind of, it's been an act of faith, if you like,
Yeah.
not least because of Malcolm McCulloch and the leader of the Low Carbon Hub, that actually this is going to continue. That even if the government still seems quite wedded to centralised generation, you cannot ever walk away from the fact that demand, the changes in demand are going to mean a lot of local energy challenges. So facing the local energy challenge is something that has to be done, and that we can demonstrate enough proof of concept in this early period that it will be possible to generate funds to continue this work. I think also there's some expectation that just as when we started off with solar, it was heavily subsidised, and now it looks after itself. Increasingly, this sort of thing will become more normalised and it will pay for itself more.
So do you talk to any other local councils outside of Oxfordshire and just say this is what we're doing?
Yes. Yes. Thanks. You're asking all the right questions. So we have we have groups called fast followers. And as we get towards the end of the project, we're going to be having more to do with them. But we already have a few councils initiatives that have expressed an interest. And it's very important to us that we document what we're doing as carefully as possible so that it can be to help with replication. I mean, I think Oxfordshire is a very promising place to try out this sort of thing for the first time. It's got a lot of favourable things going for it. But every locality is different. So we have to try and say as much as we can about, well, this works here and we think it's working because of A, B, C, or D. Not all those things will apply in another place, but at least people can make a judgment about, well, this particular thing will work for us, even if that one doesn't. Or this might work for us here, although it didn't work there. For example, we don't really have heavy industry in Oxfordshire. Hardly any. I mean, we've got the car plant out in East Oxford. That's about it, really. So there are parts of the country where things will be quite different that way. But yeah, we have fast followers and we are talking to them. We're also talking to the Energy Rev research programme, which is a very big one. So we're trying to feed the LEO experience into their more purely academic work on energy systems. And we are also talking with the Energy Systems Catapult, which some of you may have heard about, which is it's a quasi-government body which tries to do what you might guess from the term catapult. Let's make this stuff happen. Let's make it happen fast. So we're in contact with them as well. So the element of learning is really, really important. And one of the diagrams I could have shown you showed a sort of learning cycle by which you think of something, you try it out, some things work, some things don't work, you learn from it, you think of something else that will improve it, and you're constantly trying to learn in as agile a fashion as possible. Starting small and then scaling up.
Yeah. We'll have a question for an audience that's watching online.
All right.
So he's saying, thank you, Dr. Darby, very interesting. Who are the main proponents and supporters of the various projects?
Yeah.
So are they like communities, the council, or are based policies like national? So who are the supporters? Like, what's the main player?
For LEO itself, it's the network operator, the distribution network operator, Scottish and Southern Energy Networks. There are three main players, I would say, in LEO. So the Scottish and Southern Energy Networks, electricity networks. There's the Low Carbon Hub, which brings there are four main players. There's the Low Carbon Hub, which is the community energy aspect of it. Really brings the community support. There's the local authorities, particularly Oxford City Council and the County Council, which are represented on the project. So their government, the local government, and they're behind it. And then there are the universities. Yeah.
So quite regional.
Yes, that's right. It is quite regional, but we do have central government funding for it, as you've gathered.
I wanted to ask about the demand and supply balancing aspect of this. Because my very basic, naive understanding of grids is that the bigger the grid, the easier it is to balance and to average out changes in supply and demand. So what's the benefit of keeping this local?
Well, yes, you're right. It's because of the nature of what now feeds into the grid. So it used to be that the supply to the grid was from large stations that fed into the high voltage network. And the purpose of the grid was simply to spread this centralized generation through the country. But now you have solar and wind and a bit of hydro that feeds into the lower voltage local distribution network.
Oh, so local distribution networks are different from...
Yes, that's right, yes. So they're closer to us and they're lower voltage. So they're the electricity that comes to us underground and sometimes on very small overhead wires. But it's not the electricity that's coming to us on those massive great wires and pylons that march through the countryside. So it actually does need to be managed locally. And there's a network of substations also in the distribution network. And each substation acts as a sort of hub for its locality. And you need to be able to manage demand and supply within that locality. So in choosing the smart and fair neighbourhoods, and we thought very long and hard about which ones to choose, one of the key factors was that it was one that was going to present difficulties to the network operator in the next decade or so, and where they would have particular challenges. Does that make?
Yeah, I didn't realise that local scale network. So is it not possible to transport locally generated stuff not on a local network back up to like the national scale network? Is that not?
It is possible up to a point, but the local wires will only take so much.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not an engineer, and you might like to get an engineer to explain this to you with more precision, perhaps. But you know, as a layperson, that's how I understand it. So that's why, particularly, energy transition is going to have this strong local dimension to it from a technical standpoint.
What exactly is the role of EDF, for example, and some other big providers you mentioned?
Yeah, well, I was talking about this with a colleague earlier today. I mean, to be blunt, EDF's business model is falling apart, and they need to keep an eye on us, because please don't go and tweet that around the world.
What exactly are they doing within Project Leo? Because it seems to me that this is something community owned and based. So what are they going to be doing in 10 years?
Well, this is what they're very interested in, and I mean, I was putting it kind of crudely there, but the fact is, the old business models of all the big suppliers are falling apart. So they have to be thinking about what next. And of course, one of the things they can get into is flexibility trading. And of course, naturally enough, if that's going to help the system run, and B, it's an income stream for them. And working through communities may be a way of enabling this and to do it. So EDF are supplying some storage assets, or have been doing. But they have a clear interest in, finding out more about all this, because, if they're looking to the future of their business, it's going to involve some quite major changes. So they need to be learning from this as well. And also, of course, EDF bring customers to the project as well. So there's that as well. They're the only big supplier that's involved in this one. But you'll find that most projects of this kind they'll have a big supplier in there somewhere. And if you're doing community energy, you do need some kind of you know, you can't, it's not the kind of thing that you can run just with 2 or 3 keen volunteers. You do need expertise, and you do need some kind of connection to the system as a whole. The most obvious one is your network operator. But interestingly, I mean, in this country, it's the supplier that is the retailer that has the relationship with the customer. And the network operator's job is just to do the engineering over. This has historically been the case. So they're having to develop new sort of skills and capabilities to interact with customers more and understand their customers better and understand the demand better. Because back in the day, they really weren't interested in what we did. We were just load. We were just seen as load. And you just had to make sure you got enough electricity through the wires to supply that load. Now you need to think about what kind of load is it going to be? How much of it is it going to be heating, which will have a certain pattern of demand through the year and through the day? And how much is it going to be electric vehicles? And how many solar PVs are there going to be on the roof that will, you know, suddenly cause quite big changes in the flows through the distribution network if a cloud goes over the sun, you know. And even on a sunny day, you know, they go up steeply and down with the sun. And the wires were, again, you know, they were designed for one-way flow of electricity. And now in the distribution network, they're having to cope with two-way flows.
Just going to take one more last question.
Yes, because your pizzas are here.
Quite tempted, yeah.
I have a question on the challenges
Yeah.
in terms of decarbonizing, because recently I watched a video which said that you have to be very careful in terms of electrifying too quickly,
Yeah.
because there's a worry that the infrastructure and there might not be enough transmission grids and
Yeah.
lines to keep up.
Yeah.
But so this was sort of different from my original thought that sort of the mismatch of demand and supply would be the main problem. So I wanted to get your opinion in terms of what do you think is sort of the main bottleneck in terms of transitioning to net zero? Yeah, if either of these fall from another one.
I think for this country, it's probably what happens to our heating. Yes. And yes, you're right. You have to be careful about how you pace all this. There is, if I just give you one reference to check out, I think it would be a paper by my colleague Nick Eyre for energy efficiency, which has just come out, and in which he looks at what's involved in making this change through electrifying heating and electrifying transport. And actually the message that comes out of it in terms of the physics and the engineering and the environmental impact is rather a positive one. So I think I hope that paper becomes famous quite soon. But anyway, by Nick Eyre, it's in the journal Energy Efficiency, and it's looking at this sort of issue that you raise about what happens when you do have quite rapid electrification and what it can mean at system level.
Okay, I think we'll just wrap it up there. And yes, thank you so much for coming today. It was very interesting and insightful. And yeah, so if you could stay for a bit for peace, or if you're.
Thank you. Yes, I'm afraid I'm going across the road for dinner soon, so I'm going to pace myself and I'll pass on the pizza. But I'm happy to stay for a bit. Yeah, sure.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
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 This is quite interesting.